Greetings and welcome back to room 303 in our chats with Emily, as we're calling our readings through the poetry of Emily Dickinson. Excuse me. We turn now to poem 100, A Science, So the Savants Say. And this is, for us, a fascinating study in terms of Emily's dance with science. Now, when we did our series called Talks with Walt, where we did all the poems of Leaves of Grass, Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass, we commented on Whitman's dance with science, how he at times would embrace it and at times he was repelled by it. And Emily was playing a very similar game, I believe. She at times was very, very excited. At other times she was repelled. You'll remember that Whitman says in Song of Myself, passage 48, to cast an eye, to glance with an eye, or show a bean in its pod confounds the learning of all time. This notion of what science can teach us versus what we can learn through just natural experience. Now, our assumptions are that you've been following our stuff at LearnStrong.net. Down that left-hand side, Chats with Emily is our playlist here. I'm hopeful that you've already been exposed to our introductory set of comments as well as the previous 99 poems. We just finished with New Feet Within My Guarded Go. Now, it is interesting to have a little bit of background information here. The scholar Johnson, who we're following, has suggested that in this poem, the meekest flower of the mead is in fact the dandelion. The little Leontodon wakes first in the spring. In poem 142, we're going to see this. And in a letter from Emily, letter 81, to her friend Abaya Root, she will say, quote, "As soon as the first green grass comes up from a chink in the stones peeps a little flower, precious Leontodon." The flower that looks much like a dandelion. So let's now just enjoy this one. And her tension with science. She'll say it this way. A science, so the savants say, comparative anatomy, by which a single bone is made a secret to unfold of some rare tenet of the mold, else perished in the stone. So, to the eye, perspective led, this meekest flower of the mead upon a winter's day stands representative in gold of rose and lily, manifold, and countless butterfly. Now, I'm fascinated by the fact that she will begin with science, which you'll remember in poem 3, right at the beginning of our study, I climbed the hill of science. And you remember that it was in quotation marks? Of course, comparative anatomy also in quotation marks. She will say it this way, so the savants say. Now, when we get to poem 168, and in a few days, we'll hear it this way. If the foolish call them flowers, need the wiser tell? If the savants classify them, it is just as well. So when she uses this word savants, she has a tendency to be almost speaking in a derisive fashion, certainly tongue-in-cheek, no doubt. So she'll say it, a science, so the savants say, comparative anatomy. In other words, you can take a single bone, for example, if you're studying, we'll say dinosaurs, for example, and out of that you can make all of this knowledge come to life, comparative anatomy, by which a single bone is made a secret to unfold of some rare tenement of the mold, else perished in the stone. In other words, you can, in science, we have this tendency to be able to just look at one thing and we can draw all of these generalizations, which is truly remarkable. But then she comes back to the word so, which is, of course, the word of the first line. So, to the eye, perspective led. Now, again, I've said this to you guys before. I think so much of what Emily's doing in her poetry is kind of channeling Plato, and especially Republic. So notice here, we're back to perspicacity. We're back to perspective. We're back to how well you can see. So, to the eye, perspective led, this meekest flower of the mead. Now, when we get to poem 142, we're going to play around with the little Leontodon, the hawk bed that looks a whole lot like a dandelion. And Johnson, I think, may be right. She's playing around with, a meek flower, maybe a dandelion. This meekest flower of the mead upon a winter's day stands representative in gold of rose and lily, manifold, again, the beautiful rhyming, and countless butterfly. Now, the biographer Witcher points out that Emily loves to do this thing where she'll take a singular noun and have it serve as a collective. So it should have been, of course, countless butterflies. And here it's butterfly, again with the exclamation point to end. Well, what exactly is it that Emily's arguing in this poem? I think she's arguing that at 2a, that the best way to understand nature is to experience it which, of course, if we're thinking about it, think about Learned Astronomer, the Whitman poem, and he says that when I saw all the charts and everything, when I saw the science, how quickly bored, he says. I was just bored with the whole thing. I went outside, looked up at the beautiful sky and the stars, and then I understood in the mystical, you remember he uses that word mystical. At 2b, I love again the idea of using the singular noun butterfly, but using it as a collective. And we'll play this game again several times. Wisher will point this out, how interesting it is. In poem 128, and say how many do. In poem 14, he said, moldered this many may. And then, of course, here, this idea of countless butterfly. I love how he does that. Or how Wisher points that out. At 3a, well, I mentioned Whitman's Learned Astronomer. We've given full lectures in our Talks with Walt playlist there at learnstrong.net. But think about how Emerson in his classic essay Nature makes a very similar argument. I think Emerson stands behind a whole lot of what Emily's doing when especially she is critiquing science. The argument being, well, there's different ways to experience the world. Science is one of the prisms through which, right? And again, notice that idea, and notice it is in quotation marks as she plays the game, right? Comparative anatomy. You could make the argument, and I think it's fair for us to think of it this way, that so much of what Emily does in her poetry is comparative anatomy. In other words, she has this brilliant ability, much like Percy Bysshe Shelley said in Defense of Poetry, that she can make the most obvious seem so unusual. And that's what obviously all great artists do. Finally, at 3b, what is your experience with science, and to what degree is your study of Emily opening your ideas to your study of science? I hope that that's happening. Thank you.